Honda Technical Training presents Valve Adjustment.
It was a weekday. Could have been any weekday when it happened. I was working the day shift out of Service Bay 4. The customer was experiencing unusual driving problems, especially for one of our babies. The car's performance was down. Fuel consumption was up. Drivability was in the pits. Now it was up to me to find out what was wrong and fix it. That's my job. My name's Tech, Joe Tech. I carry a wrench. All her curves were in the right places, but she was in bad shape. I had a hunch, though, as I began the troubleshooting sequence. The fuel and electrical condition of the engine was okay, but the mechanical condition of the engine came up snake eyes. My hunch was right. It was the valves. It figured. Valves directly affect performance, and it takes just the right technician to get the job done. Make them too tight, and they can stay open and burn. Make them too loose, and the customer is going to complain about noise. Right, 30,000 miles. Time for an adjustment. Honda valves are adjusted every 15,000 miles, and you've got to catch these babies at just the right time because this is a precision machine. First, I had to check what the Einsteins had to say. I don't take chances. Too easy to mix up years. I touched base with the manual to note changes in the head design and any specs they might have changed from year to year. Now, if I see milky white residue inside or on top of the rockers, it's a sign of short engine operation or severe engine use. And when I see it, I let the customer know that they need to change their oil more often. Also, it's a good idea to check the gasket. At the least sign of deterioration or hardening rubber, I'm ready to replace it. No way I want the customer to come back on me because I tried to save some small change. Honda services have two methods for valve adjustment. Up to 79, you had to dance a two-step and adjust half the valves with the number 1 cylinder at top dead center. Then the other half of the valves with the number 4 cylinder at top dead center. This baby was an 83, though. That meant that the valves on each cylinder had to be adjusted at top dead center. Hey, these babies are great. When they're right, they're as smooth as a slick double play on the bottom of the ninth. Now they were just waiting. Intake, exhaust, and auxiliary. Waiting for a little tender, loving care. Adjustment technique's the same for each of them. The trick is keeping this little guy from being bent out of shape. Sensitive, very sensitive. Too much flex and the reading's blowing all to heck. I was ready. Ouch! But she wasn't. The cylinder head has to be less than 100 degrees Fahrenheit to do the job. I don't use the scientist talk too much. I treat her just like a South Street torch singer. If her temper's up, better leave her alone. While she was cooling down, I had a chance to check the specs again. I've read them 100 times, and I'll read them 100 times more. I don't make a move without reminding myself what the official rag says about procedure, arrangement, and specifications. I also check the Underhood label. It's one of the most reliable places to look for the specs. They're always right. Unless somebody changed hoods. All was forgiven. Now to work. Valve train inspection was next. That's what I like. Smooth like a cold one going down after a long day. Now, if it had been scored or pitted, it would have meant that the valve train was worn excessively. Slight scoring and scratching is okay, but when there's extreme wear, it's going to cause noise. And when inspecting the cam lobes, if any of them are going to get worn, it's going to be number 8. Honda's got a special rocker for number 8. It's thicker and has better compatibility with the camshaft material. Service news from May 83 brought me up to speed on the procedure. I see cam wear in Hondas because people forget to use the right oil. It's got to be SF classification. It's got to be. I also give close attention to cars with oil pump drive gears on the cam. And wear like this. It could lead to deterioration of the cam gear. You have to replace both gears if wear shows up. And when replacing the cam, remember old number 8. Replace it with a new style, and that's in Service News of May 83. With the preliminaries out of the way, it was time to get down to it. Getting the cylinder to top dead center isn't quite as easy as it sounds sometimes, and the way to do it can vary depending on the year of the car. For the pre-79 two-step, use the TDC mark on the crank pulley or the flywheel, depending on the model and the year. Number 1 is now in firing position. Now, for the post-79 four-step, the cam pulley has been marked to help determine top dead center. And by rotating the cam pulley, the mark is brought in line with the surface of the head. Shift the cam pulley 90 degrees and number 3 cylinder moves into firing position. "90 degrees again, and number 4 is ready. And a final 90 degrees, watching the notch this time, will bring number 2 cylinder to TDC. Be careful to check the manual, because some models have a different mark configuration, and it can fool you. I've done it 100 times, but I check the manual every time to make sure. I needed a good feel, so I used a little trick I picked up from my service materials. By checking my gauge against a calibrated micrometer, I know I've got the right feel. Now to match it. Right. Smooth as silk. I knew that just because I had a good reading on the adjustment, I still had to be careful as I retightened the lock nut to keep the right clearance. That baby has to be tight enough to prevent the adjustment screw from backing off. To be safe, I always check and then double-check the feel. Auxiliary lock nuts are tightened to 14 foot-pounds. Now, if I wasn't sure, I'd use a torque wrench on the nut to get it right. Intake and exhaust nuts get exactly the same torque. 1 down, 3's up next. 90 degrees on the cam pulley, and that ought to do it. These indicator marks really help out. She was butter in my hands now. It was a textbook job as I worked through the rest of the adjustments. Each step along the way, I checked and rechecked my readings and settings. Finally, I gave the nuts one last torque down, according to specs, of course. I like to do that for insurance, but I'm always careful not to change that setting. Hints on reassembly. Now, I always keep a sharp eye out that I don't crimp a breather hose to the air cleaner. Now, that happens, the engine's liable to blow a seal. And I'm also careful that the ground wire to the valve cover is in place. Forget that, and the electrical components can be damaged. It only takes just a little sliver to throw a good day's work out of whack and make the difference between a hack job and a pro touch of a good tech. It was worth the trouble when the customer got a taste of what good drivability is all about. It made all the sweat worth it for me, Tech, Joe Tech. Just a guy doing a job. A good job.